me and you, Nate, this was definitely not a shocker, okay? Canelo Alvarez has defeated Billy Joe Saunders, giving Billy Joe Saunders his first loss, okay, and his 31st fight. Billy Joe Saunders is now has 30 wins with one loss, and he defeated Billy Joe Saunders by an eighth round TKO after Canelo Alvarez ended up beating up Billy Joe Saunders' eye to the point where Billy Joe Saunders did not continue. He did not come out of his corner because he was unable to compete due to the fact that his eye was shut. A little bit of stats on this, Nate. Let me just get the stats real quick. So CompuBox had Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders stats. So Canelo Alvarez landed 73 out of 206 with a percentage of 35.4%. And Billy Joe Saunders landed 60 out of 294, giving him a percentage of 21.1%. Yeah, Nate, let me tell you something. We will definitely link the highlights to this fight down below. Let me tell you something, man. I'm gonna be real with you. It's Canelo right here, and then everybody else is just down there. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter who you put in front of him. Canelo will single-handedly, I think, annihilate every single one of them. It don't matter, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, Canelo is, however, not unified yet. He's close to it. He has to still fight. They're saying the fight to make is against Caleb Plant, which, by the way, when we were talking about predictions, I completely forgot about Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant has the one belt. He has the IBO super middleweight belt. If Canelo Alvarez defeats Caleb Plant, Canelo Alvarez ends up becoming the unified super middleweight champion of the world, which is something that no Mexican fighter has ever done. Which, in my case, if Canelo Alvarez defeats Caleb Plant, I think he is the greatest Mexican fighter to ever live. You guys can burn me in the comments below. I do not care. The reason why I do not care, and you guys can talk about Julio Cesar Chavez, you guys can talk about Salvador Sanchez if you want to go as far as that. I do not think there is a fighter, a Mexican fighter. If Canelo beats Caleb Plant, I do not think there is a Mexican fighter better than Canelo Alvarez. And let me explain something to you, Nate. Canelo Alvarez, I think he has fought probably 3 or 4 times in this year. That is absolutely ridiculous. Canelo Alvarez is a workhorse. He really is a workhorse, Nate. But yeah, like you know what? Let me go over the fight a little bit, okay? This one exactly how I predicted it. Remember, I told you that I could definitely see Billy Joe Saunders being behind a couple rounds. You know, I definitely see. I told you he was going to make it competitive, but he was going to be down a couple rounds before Canelo were to TKO him. I said 11th round, but then I changed it between the 8th and the 11th. And Canelo Alvarez trainer actually predicted. He said, "Look, I don't usually predict Canelo's fights." He says, "But Canelo will knock this guy out in the 8th round." And what did Canelo do? He beat up that eye to the point where Billy Joe Saunders could not continue because he could not see out of that eye. And he ended up not coming out of his corner. And so Canelo ended up winning by the end of the 8th round. So he kept word on that promise. Look, man, there's a lot. There's still a few fights I want to see Canelo have. Okay, one of them is against Caleb Plant, Demetrius Andre, who's actually from Providence, Rhode Island. He wants to fight Canelo, and he actually crashed Canelo's press conference to start talking trash. Into which Canelo said, and I quote, "Get the F out of here." He kept saying that to him and his father. Which, hey, look, man, that's Canelo's press conference. You know, in my opinion, Demetrius Andre shouldn't even have been there, but. There's Caleb Plant, there's Demetrius Andrade, and one more. I want to see him fight the Charlo brothers. That is the one fight I want to see Canelo have. I want to see him fight the Charlo brothers. And don't get me wrong, I think Canelo's going to beat the Charlo brothers, no matter which one you put in front of him. But let me tell you something. I am a big fan of the Charlo brothers, Nate, and I want to see that fight happen. So there's about 3 or 4 more fights I want to see Canelo have until he retires. But hey, look, like I said, Canelo's only 30 years old, Nate. You know? He still got a big life. He still has a long life ahead of him. He still has a little bit more to do in his career. But let me tell you something, Nate. For a 30-year-old, the fact that he's putting himself in the conversation to be one of the greatest Mexican fighters to ever live, that is absolutely amazing. It really is. Hey, let me tell you something. Again, best of luck to Billy Joe Saunders. Again, I think he broke his orbital bone. I think he broke Billy Joe Saunders' orbital bone. I remember
Yeah, it
watching.
was like it's like somewhere like under his eye, like right in between here and his nose, like somewhere around here.
Right, and again, now like analyzing the actual fight, I think Billy Joe Saunders, for the amount of time that he was in that fight, I think he did a very good job of keeping his distance. Remember, I told you the way he was going to win by points and by touching Canelo? He was doing that pretty well. That jab was really affecting Canelo Alvarez. He ended up getting some shots in on Alvarez. He was using angles to make sure in the beginning to make sure Canelo Alvarez wouldn't hit him, and it was working. I remember Billy Joe Saunders, there were times in that fight where he would give Canelo like probably a 2 or 3 piece, and Canelo would end up swinging and he end up missing because Billy Joe Saunders already had the angle around him. So, but you know what Canelo said? He said it's going to take me some time to figure out this guy, and when you figured him out, Canelo was able to capitalize. You seen the transition. You seen Canelo's confidence go up. When you looked at the seventh and eighth round, well, mostly the eighth round, when Canelo started actually taking the momentum away from Billy Joe Saunders, you see Canelo start raising his hands, and the crowd started going wild. And he did it again, and he raised his hands again. You could tell the confidence was definitely going. Canelo was definitely gaining confidence, and Canelo was finding the answer to beating Billy Joe Saunders. But let me tell you something. I gotta give Billy Joe Saunders a lot of credit. He really hung in, and he really hung in there against Canelo for as long as he could. And again, let me tell you something. Billy Joe Saunders, that is a very, very confident fighter at that. Some people might even call him cocky. He was sticking his tongue out at Canelo, and he was shaking his head at Canelo, like no matter what Canelo was throwing, it wasn't hurting him. But that's definitely a little trick in boxing. Whenever a boxer gets hit really hard and they end up like shaking their head like this, they actually got hit hard. They just don't want you to know about it. It's a classic. It's a basic trick in the book. So Canelo was able to, as rounds were to go on, Canelo was able to find openings. And I remember, here's the one thing I remember about this fight, Nate. Before the fight, Billy Joe Saunders comes out in the entrance, and during his ring walk on the Tron, on the Titantron or whatever you want to call it, it said built from a different cloth. Let me explain something, okay? If Billy Joe Saunders was built from a different cloth, Canelo Alvarez was built from a different sewing machine. Let's put it that way. We're putting Canelo in a completely different category. If that's the case, he was built from a different sewing machine, from a different seamstress. Okay, he was built from a different factory. You put it whatever way you want to. If Billy Joe Saunders was built from a different cloth, Canelo was built from a completely different place. Okay, but you know what, man? I gotta give Billy Joe Saunders credit. He really did hang in there, and I had him down a couple rounds. I had the fight 78-76 Canelo. But he was really making it a competitive fight. I mean, either way, they showed the judges' scorecards at the end, and all three judges had a Canelo. But I had Billy Joe Saunders giving him a very competitive fight until that eighth round when Canelo shut out his eye, and Billy Joe Saunders really couldn't do anything. He couldn't see out that eye. And again, it doesn't look good. His eye is not looking good, Nate. So now the other question is, a lot of people are asking, well, did Billy Joe Saunders quit, or was this justified? To me, Nate, I'm gonna be honest with you. When you're fighting probably the greatest fighter pound for pound right now in Canelo Alvarez, I think that stoppage was justified. I'm not going to call Billy Joe Saunders a quitter. And the reason why is because I understand that back in the olden days, people would fight with one eye and everything like that. I get that. But the thing is, you don't want to put too much damage on your eye to the point where you can't see out of it no more. Because you are a boxer. You still have a long road ahead of you. Billy Joe Saunders is a young boxer. I'm going to look up his age right now real quick, Nate. Or actually, if you could look up his age, that would be great for Billy Joe Saunders. But he's a young guy. He got a career ahead of him. I just don't think it's fair to call him a quitter and for people to say, well, he should have continued, considering the fact he should have continued. He basically sat there in the corner and didn't move. Come on, really? Let me explain something. If your eye got shut off by Canelo, you're not fighting neither. And if you are fighting, you're not going to have that eye no more. Okay, because he couldn't see out that eye. That eye was completely swollen shut. There was no way he was gonna see out of that eye. He couldn't see out of that eye. So the fact that people are saying he should have continued fighting, what do you want Canelo to damage his eye even more to the point where he can't see out of it no more? Come on, you guys are crazy. Okay, take that loss. Okay, recover, and then learn to fight another day. You want a long career. You don't want a short one. You want a very, very long career. And if he were to continue fighting, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think Billy Joe Saunders has that eye. Okay, and even now, it doesn't even look good. It doesn't even look good for Billy Joe Saunders. But with that being said, I wish Billy Joe Saunders the absolute best of luck. Again, congratulations to right now the GOAT, Canelo Alvarez. Okay, that is the boy right there. That is the pound for pound, in my opinion, #1 fighter in the game. And I don't even think it's close. All right. And with that being said, I've said everything I needed to say about Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders, and I will pass it on to you, Nate.
Yeah, you basically took a lot of the words out of my mouth. It was at the AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, full house there, by the way, too. So,
Jerry Jones was
um,
there, I think, too.
I think I seen him there too. Yeah, I mean it is his building, so it would explain a lot as to why he would be there. But
And one more thing, sorry, before you continue, one more
yeah,
thing. Canelo Alvarez actually, during a pandemic, get this, broke the record for the largest indoor indoor crowd in U.S. history. He had 70,000 people at that fight during a pandemic.
Wow, that is pretty crazy, and it's crazy because a lot of when you think about it, now with this vaccine, now everything's starting to go back to normal. I know the Rangers opened up their ballpark to 100% capacity. Same thing with the Astros. The NFL is planning to do that for the next season. Dana White's been doing it a lot with the UFC. Plans to do it with UFC 264 in Las Vegas. So it's a really good semblance of how like everything's starting to go back to normal and all that. It was a booming event. Everybody was going crazy. It was a pretty good one. And to answer your question about Billy Joe Saunders' age, he's 31 years old, so he's a year older than
Right,
Canelo. But
right,
it's still pretty young.
right.
And I'm looking at the picture right now about his eye thing, and I don't want to show you guys the picture because it's copyright. But you can look it up for yourself, see for yourself. But what ended up happening was it broke from like here right around the bottom, kind of coming down to like your cheekbone, like right above the mouth, like right around there. It's like split. It's like broken, like up here. And
Yeah,
I'm looking at it. It looks a little bent down here. I'm not so sure. I can't really see
right. And under the eye, you see like a kind of like a small little,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a small little, like I want to say the best way I can describe it is like a scratch, but it's not a
yeah,
scratch. It looks worse. It's a crack.
yeah, yeah.
It's a crack basically.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. And then up here, it's just completely snapped from the. So what ended up gonna and what it's called is it's multiple fractures to this zygomatic bone, which is the orbital region right around the end of the side of your skull, and it needs to be surgically repaired to reconstruct it. So I do wish him the best of luck with that. He stayed in Dallas overnight at the Dallas hospital. So I do wish him the best of luck moving forward with that. I mean, having head injuries is no joke, especially in boxing and just any sport in general. It's very, very dangerous. Um, but yeah, I mean, other than that, overall the event was really good. I hope Billy Joe Saunders can recover from this because having head injuries, that's no joke. We talk about knee injuries and foot injuries and hand injuries and all that stuff, but head injuries are just your brain's in here. You know what I mean? Your brain's in here, and if your brain is affected and your head's affected, it kind of messes with you overall. So I mean, I hope that doesn't happen with them. I do wish him the best of luck. Same thing with Canelo, the GOAT right now. You already know how it be. Oh, that's the GOAT right there, right now. Yes, it is. I do wish him the best of luck too. And overall, really, really good event. I'm pretty happy with the results.